Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Alex Rodin, who's the Director of Disruptive Solutions at Geodis. And today we're going to talk about important factors in last mile delivery. Now, whether you call it last mile delivery or final mile delivery, the bottom line is the same. It's one of the fastest growing areas in logistics. And when you consider that, up to 30% of delivery costs are related to, final mile delivery, and that you can win or lose a customer for life, depending on how well or how bad the delivery experience is. You can't really, overstate the importance of final mile delivery, last mile delivery. So what are, some of the, what does it take to create a great customer experience in last mile delivery? What are some of the important considerations companies need to be thinking about? What's the role of technology and logistics service providers in all of this? Well, those are just some of the questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to talk to Alex, who's, has got a wealth of experience in this area and on the front lines of this. And you have to share his insights and advice on this topic. So Alex, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Adrian. Really glad to be here. Really appreciate the chance to have this conversation about last mile delivery.
So, Alex, before we get into the topic at hand, whenever I bring someone new onto the program, I'm always curious how they got involved with this industry to begin with. So, why don't we start there really briefly? Tell us a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics and what your role and responsibilities are there at Geodis.
So I very quickly, born in the Northeast, went to school in the Midwest, joined the Army. I was in the Army for 9 years, and that moved me around a bit. And as you can imagine, there's a fair amount of logistics involved with that. And now I live in the Southeast. So I've had a chance to live all around the United States, travel a great deal, particularly for work. And it's amazing how logistics just has a part of every single job you can possibly do. I'd say my career has been more sales focused, but there's always been a heavy operational piece to it. So I was in retail for 6 years, furniture, and as you can imagine, the logistics of that and moving product, whether it's trying to forward stock it in the store, manage it from a warehouse, distribute it across the country, manage e-commerce. So it comes up again and again. I had the opportunity to join a startup in Atlanta in 2013, and that was focused on creating a same-day platform, which essentially connected someone who needed an item shipped to someone who was able to do it the same day. That grew, and where we recognized the greatest opportunity was the pain around delivery for businesses. They would try and solve it by buying a truck, hiring a driver, and then the truck would get a flat, the driver would call out sick, so then they needed a replacement, then they got rid of the truck, but they still needed delivery. And that's where we really identified that if we could customize the delivery solutions, because each their business is different in how they need it, that was the opportunity. I became a part of Geodis, who acquired the platform in 2016. And so my focus since joining Geodis has been exclusively on optimizing last mile, identifying the opportunities in what, as you noted, is a rapidly growing and also crowded space.
Yeah, no, great, great background and experience there. So literally you've been on the front lines of this and been on the other end, with the retailer and obviously on the platform side here, and now with, logistics service provider. So I'm going to start with, something you wrote in a blog post a few weeks ago where you said that, I'm going to quote here, creating a great customer experience in last mile delivery doesn't start with picking up the order, which is probably what most people might think, but it starts with the internal process a brand chooses to manage its last mile solution. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
Absolutely. So there are lots of companies and lots of people who focus on providing a service where you've got some stuff that you would like picked up and delivered to your customers, and I can do that. And I'll get the right vehicle and I get a driver to do it, and I'll do it within the time frame you give me. But I'm only solving the final output of a very complex system that if it's not built well, it's just not going to work, and it's not going to bring value to my customer or their customers. And so where I feel there's the greatest value in getting involved in truly coming up with a last mile solution is you've got to ask yourself, well, what are going to be the internal operations that will dictate how an order even arrives to me so that I can go pick it up? If I'm picking up in a store, how's that team going to be trained? How am I going to engage the end customer to even be aware that same day delivery is a solution? And how am I going to accelerate the adoption rate so that people use the service faster and faster to demonstrate the growth that's possible. So we like to get involved very early on, sit down and think holistically about it. And yes, we can also pick up and drop off items in markets around the globe. But most importantly, we want to be there as architects of a solution so that when it does come time for us to do those pickup and drop offs, we are at the end of a very well built and also tailored to the benefit of the specific customer and their customer's experience.
That's a great point. I mean, I think one of the things you said there in your response is you kind of refer to it as a system, right? And it involves, multiple stakeholders within the organization, and multiple processes. And I think in a lot of cases, unless you really ask these questions up front and understand how the different parts of your organization impact, even at the front end, further upstream, how that could potentially impact the final delivery, the final mile experience. Unless you're asking those questions and really think through it and understand that, I think you might be setting yourself up for some challenges or disappointments at the back end, right?
Absolutely. And when I, sit down with the great people who are representing amazing global brands, iconic brands, and they've been charged to think about what the solution would best be for that brand and same day. They know about same day. They've done the research. These are intelligent people. But I think all too often the focus is on, well, what has someone else done? And I guess that could work for us rather than stepping back and say, what does my customer want? I mean, it's one very quick example. Working with a brand. They are global and iconic, and they have different lines of business. And I can tell you that the profile of their customers for each of their brands is not identical. And so the need of each customer for each specific brand is going to be different when it comes to a same-day delivery solution. So going to them and saying, okay, the fact that you have multiple brands doesn't matter. We're going to come up with one solution, one SLA for same-day delivery. I don't believe that's the right way to think about it, and it's not going to benefit. There's an opportunity in last mile to earn and grow customer loyalty, and I believe that would be a missed opportunity if you're not thinking strategically on how will it really benefit people based on how they engage with the brand.
No, that's a great point. So certainly there's no one size fits all solution across the industry, and certainly not even a one size fits all solution even within a company and the different brands or lines of businesses that they might have. So I think that's an important point there. Kind of one of the other areas that, when you talk last mile delivery, it almost goes hand in hand with free delivery. I mean, these days, it seems like those two things are, something a lot of people, talk about these days, even though we all know there is no such thing as, a free delivery. So with almost everybody these days, offering free delivery, how do you differentiate? Can you give an example how you differentiate?
So I think this is another example of people look around and they're going to follow what other people are doing because they don't want to lose customer loyalty because they feel they're not offering competitively. So we know in the industry, there is no such thing as free delivery. You're simply not charging your customer a separate fee to get an item delivered, assuming that it fits within certain criteria, whether it's you're going to get it in 2 days, whether it's going to come very slow, or only on certain items, or you pay me a subscription, whatever the model is to qualify for free shipping. But I believe that because of this mentality that customers only want free, when it comes to shipping, we're missing the fact that customers ultimately want what they want. And if I want to get a gift to my mother on her birthday, and I've got specific requirements for the item that I want and the time it's got to be there, I will happily pay that fee to get it there because that's what I want. And that's certainly part of the consumers. Yes, 70% of consumers, they're going to take the cheapest option every time. But what about that other 30%? And then the question is, what's your brand and what does it mean to them? Because it doesn't do a lot of good if I'm expecting an item and you tell me to get there by the end of the day, but I've left my office at 6 and it shows up at 8:30. So giving customers the opportunity to choose and pay for a more specified delivery experience, I don't think brands should be afraid of that. I think they should embrace it as an opportunity to give customers what they want. At the end of the day, if I don't get the meal that I want, but you tell me that it was cheap, I'm not sure that's going to make it a great dining experience.
Right. So I think one of the things you alluded to there, and I think some of the areas where I'm beginning to see maybe some differentiation is, being willing to pay for even a more time definite delivery, being able to pay perhaps for some value added services, whether it's installation or, takeaway of the old item or things like that. So I think, I think those are some of the examples where I think you're right. I mean, I'm happy to pay for someone to, take my, I just had a new grill delivered, and I happily paid for them to not only deliver it, but to assemble it and to bring it to my house and to take the old, 12-year-old grill away. And I happily paid that,
Right.
because that was a value added service for me.
Yep.
So,
And that's exactly it. And I think that you, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Finish your thought there. I'm sorry.
I was just going to note, and I said, my guess is that made it a better overall shopping experience for you, that rather than getting a great deal on a grill, you were left with what you wanted, a working new grill and the old grill out of your life. So that, I would say, makes a better overall shopping experience.
Right. Absolutely. And the fact that, I was reading, when I was reading and doing the shopping and reading the reviews and everything else, people were saying it was taking them, 6 to 8 hours to assemble the grill. And I said, I don't have 6 to 8 hours. and knowing me, I'll probably put, I'll probably end up with 3 screws at the end and not know where they go. So, that was part of my motivation there as well. Overall, last mile, final mile delivery is it's a fast growing area, but one of the fastest growing is same day delivery. And in a recent, Talking Logistics guest commentary, you said that the way each company chooses to solve same day delivery must reflect their brand and their customer expectations. Can you share some examples of how companies are solving same day last mile delivery in different ways?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got a lot of brands, and what they'll do is they'll offer you for a low price or free or heavily subsidized price the opportunity to get an item same day. And typically the SLA on that will be end of day, which usually means around 9 o'clock local time. And that's how most companies are solving it. And that may work very well for a lot of brands. But I think that the brands that are looking at same day but haven't jumped in have hesitated because they don't see whatever same day solutions exist as an extension of their brand. So it's going to be very important, whether it's driver appearance, driver knowledge. Can they bring you a product and speak knowledgeably of it? I mean, again, there's a lot of people out there who can happily pick up and deliver an item, do it efficiently and professionally, but maybe they can't speak to the item itself, can't answer questions. So I believe that brands are thinking more and more about how do we extend ourselves in a way where the customer, yes, they're primarily receiving a delivery, but overall their impression is going to be they still had a positive interaction with the brand. It wasn't just receiving an order that they placed. So I think that strategic understanding is where we're going to see the companies that have not stepped into same day aggressively are going to ultimately enter, because it is essential. It is a customer demand. People are not going to start backing off of wanting stuff quickly.
Right. And I think the connection to the brand, I think it's critical, because at the end of the day, if you have a negative delivery experience, final mile experience, and let's say you're using a third party service to do that, and if they show up late, if they, trek mud into your house, if they break something, whatever might cause a negative experience, they're not going to think about that third-party carrier or blame that third-party carrier. They're gonna blame the brand, right? And it's going to be tarnishing the brand. And I think that's where, to my earlier comment, I mean, you can have done everything right up front in the sales process, and just in those last few, that last interaction, you can kind of lose that customer for life. And in this age of social media, where you can then post a negative experience and share it with friends on Facebook and so on and so forth, that could have a longer term financial impact, for a brand, right?
No question. I mean, it's the only, you think about the length of a supply chain. I mean, take the example of your grill. I mean, it started off as independent pieces, separately manufactured, probably across the globe. And those pieces were moved from manufacturing plants overseas to an assembly plant somewhere else. They crossed oceans. They've been on rail. They've been on trucks, to wind up with a driver or drivers showing up at your door to assemble it and take away your old grill. And the only part of that entire complex supply chain that you had a face-to-face interaction with was the last mile. And so if that's not handled well, the fact that everything else prior to that was executed well is really a moot point. And it's interesting, because in this age, I mean, people are always speaking of the Amazon effect. heard an interesting point lately that in the beginning, when e-commerce was just getting going, all consumers focused on were price and how easy it was to use the website to order. And those are really the only two criteria. And now, as we've seen the expansion of delivery solutions, customers have added a third component to how they view a brand and a site when it comes to ordering online, and that's the after purchase experience. So that includes customer interaction. I had an issue. I need to be able to get updates on when my item's arriving and what the delivery process was like. So now those three criteria drive whether or not I'm going to come back. So brands can't just be excellent on price and can't just be excellent in the user experience. They also need to execute that post-purchase experience. And failure to do so is as damaging as not being competitive on price or having a bad user interface with your technology.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point. I think that's why, one of the interesting trends that I've been seeing over the past, few years is, logistics and transportation specifically, being, moving up the maturity curve, if you will, where companies are not just looking at it as a cost center, something that happens, in that building back there, right? They're really looking at it as a strategic weapon or a competitive differentiator. I think because they're starting finally to recognize, it's vital importance in brand and profitability and driving, not only, obviously you still have to manage the cost component to it, but they're seeing the opportunities of how it can impact the top line and market share and drive revenue growth if you do it right and leverage it, effectively. So let's talk a little bit about, the role of technology and logistics service providers here. I mean, what's their role here and to help companies be successful in last mile delivery?
So, technology, again, is going to drive the best solutions, and it is going to be touched by a lot of people. There's going to be, getting back to our earlier question, we were discussing all the pieces that go into ultimately creating a same-day solution, very similar in thinking about the technology as well. Once an order is placed, how does that information get transmitted into the system that creates the delivery? How can the people who are managing the deliveries access it and interface with it and manage it? How can I aggregate the data and better understand it so that I know what my customer behavior is, and how are the people performing the deliveries going to be able to better manage the deliveries through technology? That includes everything from what the drivers are utilizing on their smartphones to routing and other optimization tools, to keeping the customer aware of what the delivery timeline is, when they can expect to get it, and also just making sure that the person with the item and the person waiting on the item can communicate seamlessly with one another to cut down a lot of those final barriers to a successful delivery.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the things that I've experienced is, actually getting, texts on my phone, giving me, updated ETAs, or, hey, your driver is, 30 minutes away. And I always appreciated those, because then I know, okay, I know I shouldn't get on that phone call right now, or I know I got to hurry back home now because I know he's going to be there within a, half hour, without even me having to, pick up the phone and inquire, where's my order, or is it going to get here? Just being kept informed. So kind of even leveraging kind of the texting technology is something that I've experienced myself. As a way to wrap up, I mean, what do you see as the biggest mistake that, a company can make related to, last mile delivery? And, what questions should they ask themselves to assess whether they're, setting themselves up for success or failure in this area?
So it's human nature. We know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. And that can really be a challenge as people are thinking about a same-day solution. Lots of big companies are looking at this space, and they've got smart folks who are tasked with coming up with a solution or bringing a solution. But I'd say it's critical to sit down with the right people who have experience in this space and really come to understand what's going to be the same-day solution that brings the most value to you and your customers. It's not enough to just be able to say, hey, we can pick up an item and have it delivered to you same day. There's got to be a greater value, and that's going to differentiate you from your competitors. It's literally a competitive advantage if you sit down and focus on what do customers truly want out of same day, what options do you want to scale to offering them, what you need to do internally to manage that so that your team is able to execute, and so that your partner in delivering is in the best position to succeed and bring that great customer experience, extend the brand to you and your customers.
No, great points. I think it brings it back full circle. Really, thinking about this, more holistically than just, hey, we can go and pick up an item and deliver it at the final, to the end destination. They're really having to think through a lot of these, these questions, and even knowing what questions to ask, so that you can, build a successful process and system that goes beyond just the picking up and delivering, aspect of it. So Alex, we're out of time here, and like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we could probably spend the whole day, a whole conference, we could probably put together on this topic alone. It's so rich with opportunities and challenges and potential for learning. But I think you brought up some great food for thought and advice for people to think about in this area, and certainly appreciate you making the time to be with us today.
Really enjoyed it, Adrian, and always happy to sit down and talk logistics.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Geodis website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Alex, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.